Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. Well, the day will come when the earth's undone. We will run and we will hide the sun. I'm looking for my heart and mind. I'm looking deep into the Word of God. Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. Well, the day will come when the earth is one, and we will run into the Father's arms. I said, loose thunder in the sky, but freedom is the question why. Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. Jesus, you are my desire. Jesus, you are my desire. Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. Jesus, you are my desire. You are my desire. You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to SDAQ&A. My special guest is Rachelle Anonymous. How are you, Rachelle?
Hi, I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. It's book club day.
Yay.
Woohoo! And we're still looking today at the same one we were chatting about the other week. And it is Whitewashed by Sydney Cleveland. And again, we will be looking a little bit at that book and some interesting quotes that you will share with us that we'll discuss, and we'll read comments that come in as well. And very much looking forward to that. And then afterwards, as we did last time, we will go into a private Zoom chat with everyone here that wants to join us. And Rachelle will continue reading a chapter or two from that book. I think we need to make sure we get book club going maybe every week or second week, because that way we don't have such a big gap between them. And I was thinking that what we might be able to do is do the Zoom private book club reading after our good news message each week, because that's a bit of a shorter message, and we just go straight into that maybe for half an hour or so, even if it's just chip away every week. If you can, we can discuss that later.
Yeah, we can talk
But
about it.
and the other thing I wanted to do today was just get some of your thoughts on other books as well that we will be discussing later on. So let's start there, and welcome everybody. Good to have you all here watching today and gathering together. I'll tell you about a big thing I'm starting tomorrow, but I'll wait a little while. I'll jump into that later on. So take it away, Rachelle. Share with us some other books that we will look at down the track, and then we'll get into today's book.
All right. Well, I've got 3 book recommendations today. And I mentioned this during the last book club. It's actually a particular version of the Bible that I found really helpful. I don't know if you can see the spine there, but it's called
Oh yeah.
the Cultural Backgrounds Study Bible. I have it in the NRSV version. They also have it in NIV and I think NKJV or KJV. I'm not sure which. They're available hard copy or as an ebook, and I really, really like them because it goes into the historical background of various verses. It's not an every single line by line kind of commentary, but it's full of notes. It's full of historical references. It has articles every once in a while about a particular topic or theme or object or whatever's being talked about. And it's just really helpful. I mentioned it to someone who mentioned in book club that they're having trouble reading the Bible without using that Adventist lens of putting all of the kind of the mindset of like the great controversy and stuff, quotes from Ellen White, all of that, reading that into the text just automatically out of habit. And this really kind of helps combat that because it really forces you to read the Bible within the historical perspective of when it was written, who it was written for. All of that kind of information is in there. And that's really not how we're taught to read the Bible as Adventists. Unfortunately, at least in my
Mm,
experience, we're very much taught a narcissistic view
okay.
where everything in the Bible is God's personal love letter to you and it's all about you and what does God want to say to you. And I'm not saying that there's not space for personal application or interpretation even, but I think when you only look at it from your modern perspective, you put
Mm.
things into the text that aren't actually there.
Mm.
And
And I think
anyways,
one of the things that sorry to jump in there, but one of
oh
the
please.
things that Marion Davis and Fanny Bolton had as a skill was turning Ellen White's writings into that very personal, intimate kind of a conversation. You do read the interpretation of Ellen's prequel to the Bible, her paraphrasing of the Bible, her apocalyptic predictions, and her telling us of what the future is going to be like, all through the lens of their very, very clever writing skill, which brought you into the story. That's what a good writer does. They make you think that you're the hero or you're the protagonist or you're right in there. So I think that's one thing that you've made me realize I haven't thought about before, that those women, the editors, had a real skill at taking her writings and turning them into, like a piece of fiction, like that was, a real story, like an absolutely incredible story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's some good in that. I just think there's also there's the danger of reading stuff into it that's not there,
Yeah.
and applying things in certain places that shouldn't be applied, or forcing your interpretation into something that's was never meant to be there.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
anyways, so
that's true.
that's my first recommendation. It's a really great resource for, so you don't have to stop and try to Google a whole bunch of articles all at once to try to pick apart different things. It's by no means completely comprehensive, but it's very, very helpful in getting kind of the gist of the historical context of when are things written and why, and even just the basic stuff like not all of the Psalms were written by David. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I had not been taught that. I had just, my Bible didn't have headings of this was written by this person and this is the context and when it was written. And it's so much more interesting to read it in context. Anyways,
Perfect.
moving on to number 2. My other 2 books, I've got one kind of on the emotional side of the conversation and one kind of on the scientific side of the conversation, mental side, but they overlap a little. So this book is really fantastic. It's called Wounded Free: Understanding and Healing from Spiritual Abuse. And so those who have been hurt by the church and are really dealing with the aftermath of that, it is such a good read. It's very gentle. It very specifically does not blame you for what you have experienced, but it also it breaks it down like on just all the different aspects of the way spiritual abuse can impact your life, socially, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of that. It's got really good chapters. I especially like they have an entire chapter specifically on women's issues because women experience spiritual abuse from a completely different angle that men do. And they really
can you unpack that a tiny little bit and how what the differences are?
Well, it's kind of, let me pull up that chapter. It's I think kind of just to sum it up in one word, like women experience spiritual abuse from a very misogynistic point of view that men often don't. Like you've had, I forget her name, you had that one guest on there on your show several months ago talking about that one pastor who was like advocating for marital rape.
That was
How
I
we're
forget
made
the lady's name now, but yes, she did highlight the unique kind of her ministry is totally to women who have been abused spiritually and physically.
Yeah, I don't feel that men have the same experience with spiritual abuse in that it's not as tied to their gender as much. They're not told that unless you do X, you're a bad woman. Like God created you to be an object for men to use and abuse and enjoy. And very, very specifically in high school, I remember being told, like, sit down, shut up, do what the men tell you to do. Like you're not in charge here. They're just anyways, it's it's such a complicated topic, and it's just but anyways, that's just one of the chapters in here. Something that I really appreciated in like somewhere in the first couple of chapters was it talked about how different trauma triggers work in relation to your spiritual life, and how sometimes even like reading the Bible can trigger a lot of trauma for people.
Wow.
it was the first time somebody had acknowledged that. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I relate to that so strongly. And for anyone who has experienced that or has trouble reading, that's why I switched to this other Bible version.
Yeah.
I really like the NRSV because, and there's an updated version of it too, because that specifically goes through and it removes all of the gendered language that doesn't need to be there. Unlike the KJV, where everything is to men and groups of people are referred to as men because, women weren't counted as people.
Yeah.
But anyways, just it's such a good book. It just touches on so many things, and it's so gentle and loving and caring, and it's very much from a not a deconstruction point of view, but a disentangling point of view. It's like, how do you heal your spiritual life when it's kind of been usurped and taken from you and used to harm you? Like, how do you get back to a healthy relationship with God when you don't remember what that looks like, or you've never had that, you don't know what it looks like at all? Anyways, it's a really good. I'll hold it up one more time, but it's really good.
I'm just actually writing down little notes as we go. So
Yeah,
if you
for
see
the
me head down, I'm just taking notes of the book titles and the authors. And
Wounded Faith, Understanding and Healing from Spiritual Abuse. I mean, it's even got a chapter on marital damage and recovery following religious abuse, and like how that can happen within relationships and stuff. Anyways, it's just so fantastic. It's very well written.
You
It's
may
very
have said this, but it was the author an Adventist, or that's just a Christian author?
No, they're not an Adventist. They're from a high demand evangelical background. And they've since moved on to a more liturgical expression of
Right.
Christianity.
You'd be too young to remember, but I remember when the Living Bible came out, and I thought it was just, and I now know why it felt so refreshing. It's because of many of the Ellen White infused kind of stories and predictions and things that you're reading relate to what's going to happen to any minute now. They all took the Bible reading just took on a bit of a scary kind of, narrative. So when I read the Living Bible, luckily it came out. Someone watching might be able to say when, but it really had a huge impact on the Adventist church, but also the broader Christian body, because it got a little bit of flack because it wasn't so accurate in some ways. But I loved the way it just turned it into a story, and it was quite positive. And yeah, and so it sounds like the book you're referring to, the version you use, it's not paraphrased, but it's a translation that is way more accurate and easy to read. So can you just say what that was again? The which one?
NRSV. They have an updated version that just came out a couple years ago as well, called the NRSV EU. And something else I really like about it is the people who translated it, they're not coming from one specific background. They had a whole bunch of like Protestants, Catholics, even Jewish, like what's the word? Experts consult on this translation. So it's not coming from a biased point of view as well. It's very strictly like looking at what is here, what is supposed to be here, what has been added in that's not supposed to be here, staying true to the text, but updating it into modern language so that a lot of those connotations aren't there anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, kind of similar. So the Wounded Faith book, very much, it's scholarly in the sense of it deals with trauma very from a biological perspective of how it works, but it's geared more toward the emotional side and the healing and all of that. Kind of on the other side, this book, Combat, did not get a glare there.
No, it's good. Yeah, Combating Cult Mind Control.
Control by Stephen Hassan is so good. I'm not done reading it yet, but it's so good. I've heard him talk. He's been on Mormon Stories podcasts and other shows like that. basically, if you don't know who he is, he's one of the world's top leaders in cult research and studies and how to recover. He used to be a leader in the Moonies back in the 70s.
Wow. This
He
guy actually did himself.
this
Was
guy
himself.
was in it deep. He was in the top level. Like he met like the leader Moon like himself several times and stuff. Anyways, he was really up there, one of their biggest advocates and recruiters. He got in a car accident and his family was able to get him help and get him to what's the word? Not detransition. There's a word for it. Anyway, get out of the cult that way. And so now he spent his whole life doing research and helping people to escape and recover. And so this is a lot of his work. It's also a lot of his story of how he got in there, how he got out. But it's very brainy, it's very sciencey, and it focuses on not so much the emotional abuse side of it, but the tactical stuff of like how does an organization manipulate you. One of the big things I learned from this book is that your conscience can be manipulated. It can be swayed very easily using the right tactics. I was taught growing up that your conscience is more or less the Holy Spirit talking to you, and that is so not the case because the conscience can be swayed.
And we'd like to think that, as we have this conversation, that leaders and pastors, the good guys that are fighting for the good people of the Adventist Church, would never do that purposefully. But what I've come to realize, and if you watch the evolution of corporations, they literally have an identity of their own, that once the original leaders have died and moved on and the original board members have been replaced 20 times, the system itself, how it has been created, will continue to manifest that culture. And that's how a corporation goes on for decades and decades, even after its founders have died. And I think that's what's happening here. Like if I was a Baptist, if I'd been grown up a Baptist or an Anglican or an Episcopalian or a Methodist or Presbyterian or Uniting Church or whatever denomination, I doubt I would be putting on a Q&A podcast to have discussions about, oh, hang on, something's not adding up here. There's something about Adventism, just like J-Dubs and just like Mormons, there's something there that needs to be addressed, looked at, discussed. It is not a benign religion. And so those watching who feel very uncomfortable when we seem to infer that there's a cultish kind of mindset within the system of Adventism, just step back from your judgment of Rachelle and I and others for saying these things and go, hang on a second, maybe there is something there. I mean, I was 5th generation Adventist, didn't leave till I was 54. I tried, I had every single reply that you guys have had, and something slowly was revealed to me about the system of Adventism that does things to your mental health that you might benefit from. Just pausing your triggered response to us, just pause it and go, hang on, okay, I'm not going to take it personally. Pete and Rachelle aren't attacking me. Why am I so upset with them for saying stuff? And just look at the content of what we're saying. So this might be a good starting point for that kind of person.
I think it really is, because it's not specifically attacking the Adventist Church or specific churches or groups or whatever. I mean, obviously he talks about the Moonies a lot because that was his experience.
Yeah.
It's what I like about it. It's not kind of the black and white thinking of, oh, here are like the top 10 identifiers of a cult, and hey, check off however many relate to you. I don't remember how many it was. I've seen a list like that when I was, I think, in high school, of like, oh, look, here's all the reasons that say, oh, this thing is a cult. But look, hey, we only check off 9 out of 10. So yay, we're not a cult. Like, no, that's not how it works. He's engineered something where it's much more fluid. He has something called the influence continuum, or also known as the bite model of control. I'll try to get it close up to the screen there. But if you can see, it's kind of get it on camera here. It's kind of a continuum between what makes something healthy or not healthy. And it's basically you use it to take a look at whatever organization it is or group or whatever, to look at, okay, are they having a healthy level of control here or not? In the BITE model, BITE stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. So you use this continuum to really analyze, okay, behavior. What things are in place in this particular group that controls my behavior? How much freedom is allowed? How much control is allowed? And then information, how much access to information do I have? Is it biased? Is it unbiased? Am I allowed to seek out unbiased information? That kind of thing. Thought control. Are you taught thought stopping techniques and that kind of stuff? Like, are you taught to self-regulate your brain and to stay in the group think, all that kind of stuff? And emotional control of, are you allowed to feel all your emotions? Do they control the way you are allowed to feel things and express your emotions and all that kind of stuff? But anyways, it's not a book where it's black and white. Oh, this is a cult. This is not a cult. It's very much more, how do cults operate? What techniques do they use to manipulate and control people? How do they get people into the cult? How do they get people to stay into the cult? Why do people who are in a cult not realize that they're in a cult? All that kind of brainy, sciencey, how does this work very specifically. So I think it's very helpful for if you've had a cultish kind of experience, but you can't quite label what about it specifically was wrong. This might give you the words and the information to say, oh, yeah, they taught me thought stopping techniques by doing da 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 or whatever. And even if not, if you've had a great experience in the Adventist church or any other church, or if you're a leader spiritually or even in a business or whatever, it's a really good book to read to make sure, like, hey, is the group that I'm a part of like creating a healthy environment for people, or is stuff going on either intentionally or unintentionally that is causing other people harm?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyways, so yeah, that's kind of, those are my book recommendations.
They're good. Can you hold them up again? Just so, yeah.
So on
Those
the
two.
basic side, the cult mind control.
Yeah.
On the emotional side, wounded faith. I did want to address somebody in the comments. Let me scroll down a little. I love this name. No Sunday Law Coming commented, I take it Stephen Hassan is not a fan of religion. Stephen Hassan does not, he's not against religion. He has said very openly, like, religion can really work for people if it's done in a healthy way. Where he is not a fan of it is when it veers over into that unhealthy culty control where it starts to harm people. He's very against that.
Right.
But yeah, no, this is not an anti-Christian book. This is not an anti-religion book. It's just a make sure you're not in a cult. Make sure you're not doing culty things to your people.
Yeah.
Kind of book.
And one culty thing is if people like yourself and myself are not welcome to engage with the people who are having these assertions made against them or to them, if they try and shut down that dialogue, that is a real sign that something's not healthy. There's a book by, I've forgotten his name, De Bono, Four Hats or something like that. I've mentioned it a few times and I keep forgetting the title. I'll try and find it and bring it up on the screen. But it talks about a healthy business, movement, culture, movement, religion, whatever, welcomes people to put on the hat. So that, the dissident hat, or the hat of asking why, or the hat of challenging, beliefs that have been held for a long time, traditional beliefs. That kind is healthy. But the Adventist Church clearly does not want open dialogue that in any way puts kind of a scrutinizing, light on certain belief claims. And as I said the other week, if you are making a profoundly intense belief claim, for example, the close of probation, if you're making that kind of claim and people go, well, hang on a second, can you actually defend that? To suddenly get all upset and attack those people instead of discussing it, that's a real indication that your movement is heading towards a cultish kind of persona, vibe, whatever.
When we get into a little bit of recap of what we read last week in Whitewashed, I think that comes from because a lot of the system is built on lying and manipulating people rather than being open and honest. And they don't want people discussing and dialoguing and even understanding like other Christian denominations and where we differ. Like, can be so healthy to help you understand yourself and others, but they don't want that. They just want you to keep believing there's only one way and it's our way. Don't question it. Don't look anywhere else. Everybody else is wrong. We are the remnant. We are the special ones.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Stop messing with the sales funnel. Someone wrote to me this week, and their father, I think it was I'm not in the state. I won't mention names, but he in the mid to late 50s and into the 60s, he was, I think, at division level youth leadership kind of thing, and she was saying that when she was raised, there was no talk of that kind of Ellen White culty stuff, the sanctuary, scary stuff, time of trouble, and I think, well, that's a miracle, but B, awesome. That's great. If that happened to you, that's great. And there are a lot of people that say that to me. And in fact, my own upbringing wasn't truly marinated in that. My parents were very good at not talking about that stuff. And my falling absolutely in love with music, secular music when I was 11 or 12, that shielded me as well. But if your movement itself, regardless of your personal experience, if the movement itself has more dangers and pitfalls and potholes and mines and minefields, it doesn't really matter that you had a sunny Adventism, because you might shine that sunny Adventist light on people and they might come into the church. But there's a high chance that, I reckon a good 70 to 80% chance that people coming into the church or being born into the church will soon stumble across some of these kind of minefields. And so therefore, you've got to be careful proselytizing people into a religion that, is more often than not a dangerous place for kids' mental health and for many adults' mental health as well. What are your thoughts on that? Like, can you unpack what I've just said a little bit more clearly, which I often get people to do?
Sure. Well, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, in light of I didn't see your programs about the kids stuff last week, but I was aware of them. But just it makes me think of, I can't think of the verse off the top of my head, but the reference, but the verse in the Bible talking about leading children astray, and it would be better for that person to tie a millstone around their neck and throw themselves into the sea rather than lead somebody else to something harmful.
Yeah.
And I feel that, like, I feel that those of us on the outside who have left have kind of come to that conclusion, and that's part of why we leave and why we say, oh, we can't put our name to this. We can't be a part of something that actively harms people. Like, and I think the Bible backs up that authenticity, especially with that section of saying don't cause harm to other people like that, because you'll pay for it in the end, more or less. And even so, and even if not, like, why would you do that to somebody else? And I think that's something that maybe the gospel Adventists, as you call them, whatever long title you're using now,
The
that
liberal, progressive,
I,
revisionist gospel Adventist.
I feel like that's something they haven't really wrestled with. And I think that's because they're still kind of in the Adventist mindset of manipulate people for the sake of the gospel. Like, kind of, it's really shady. Like, sometime maybe we can do a different program where I talk about my experience colporteuring for the church.
I really want to do that. Yes, you
All the
mentioned that in
techniques.
our last chat.
I
Yeah.
was taught a lot of techniques of
Ooh.
how to lie to people in order to make them buy Ellen White books. And
Yeah. Yeah.
just, which I feel bad about now. I apologize to anyone who might be watching this that I lied to in order to sell a book.
And
But
and just so you know, when we do that, people will write and say, well, that wasn't my experience. And they will also write, well, that was never sanctioned. That's just rogue elements within the church.
if
It's
it's a
like, for
church,
sure.
if it's a
Sorry.
church funded sorry, I would argue that if it's a church funded program, then the church is liable for what you're teaching kids.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's that the reason, maybe another reason why the people who are stuck in the middle of saying, oh, I don't agree, but oh, I can't leave, and they're still trying to keep people in the church and say stay. I think they're kind of in that maybe you should consider not tying around your millstone around your
Yeah.
neck kind of a thing, because it's yeah.
And it's
There's
like
just
people say, oh, well, if you went into the local,
and I think
Presbyterian church or whatever, oh, you'd find problems and flaws there. Yeah, this is a whole different kettle of fish. This is a religion that has one person, the main founder. There were three perhaps main founders: Joseph Bates and James White. But Ellen White was the one who brought the all of the special supernatural element into it. So she's getting all these messages from God, sending them, confirming all sorts of things inside the church. This is not a typical Protestant religion. This is a very unique one. And it's almost like, oh, no, nothing to see here. And I'm just saying, look, those who feel, upset that we're making these challenging statements, just sit back for a moment. And I eventually did. I went, hang on a second. Why is everyone having a go at my church all the time? I love my church. I spend all my ministry singing and saying to young people, stay in the church, mow lawns, not reputations. And then one day I went, hang on a second, what's going on here? And it was to do with women's ordination. And I thought, well, this is a systematic kind of suppression of women and men. And then gradually I thought, okay, stop defending. Just sit back for a minute and look at the evidence. This is a whole new kettle of fish here.
Mhm.
And just look at it. Just take a look at what has been said and done.
Mhm.
Because perhaps the liberal, progressive, revisionist gospel Adventists are more brainwashed than they realize.
Mhm. To which I recommend this book. It really helps with the unbrainwashiness.
We need book club every day. Just read books. And I'm very happy for these folk to come on the program. The Bob Wolfgram's going to come on again in March or April and chat about his thesis of the four types of Adventists, and revisionists are one of them. And he would call himself a revisionist. There's a subgroup called the Rebel, which I think I would fall into. But the rebels and revisionists kind of stay in the church, and they feel good that they're being a bit rebellious, and they feel that they're revising. But I feel, what are you actually revising? What if you go back to day one in the barn, where they're all going, hang on a second, the Lord he didn't come back, but last night he started a new ministry. That from that second that Ellen White confirmed that cornfield inspiration that what's his name had, not Cozier, the other guy, Hiram Edson, was it? The moment she had a confirmative vision on that, that's day one. What are you revising that? The only way to revise it is to say, no, that was wrong. And if you say that was wrong, what she said was confirmed by God is not true. Therefore, God didn't tell her that. How can you revise that? It's just wrong. Immediately, to revise the Adventist Church, you immediately have to do away with the only unique doctrine it has. So what's going on then? Then you're just the same as every other Protestant movement. So you might as well be one. Oh dear. Yeah.
Did you have some other books to hold up too?
Well, no, I didn't today. I thought I wouldn't make the pot more murky. I did have a question though for those to have a little bit of a look. The Now book and the Sunlight book. I'm wondering if it's the same book. But when Mary McLeod left the church, because she wrote that other book called Betrayal, which is for free, or Betrayal. It's available online for free, and she took the church to court for unequal pay. She was standing at the bubbler or the drinking fountain, and she's chatting to the guy who was a copywriter or whatever, doing exactly the same job as she was doing. And in discussion, she finds out that he was earning like 20-30% more than her. So she, she took the church to court. They settled out of court, and in many ways, the whole of the church, the way they pay people, was restructured in the 70s, which is fantastic. But I've got a feeling that, and I'd love someone watching if they could confirm, but I've got a feeling that when that happened, they re-released this as Sunlight. I might be wrong, because someone put a quote from it, from Sunlight, the other day, and I just happened to be reading this, and the same quote was in here. Now, whether they got the quote wrong or whatnot, but the two books are very similar. So they're about end times, and this one seems to have had a bigger effect in this part of the world than Sunlight in your part of the world. So, and someone said I shouldn't give this air or oxygen or something, and I'm like, I'm not giving it oxygen. I'm warning people away from it. And you only need to go and read The Great Controversy to find out even worse things than this book. Project Sunlight. Project Sunlight. Thanks, Peter Mashenko.
They read us that in grade school, Adventist grade school.
The Now one?
Project Sunlight.
Project Sunlight, yeah.
Not thought about that in quite a while, but yeah, I remember that was very traumatic.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering, if those two books are the same. We'll get someone to read. Peter Mashenko is watching today, and he's brilliant at chasing up stuff like that. I think Adrian's watching. He's brilliant as well. Well, we'll jump now into Whitewashed and give us a quick summary of it, and then read a few comments. There's your version, which is so similar to the cover of The White Lie, isn't it?
I know. I associate anti-Ellen White books with hot pink now.
With those colours, yeah. Hot pink and white.
Yeah. So just kind of to summarize, we read the little intro, and we read the first chapter called Who Really Wrote Those Books last time. And so is the chapter dealing on Ellen White's claim to divine inspiration. So it touches a little bit on who she claimed to be getting all these words from, like where did this inspiration come from? And then it also touched on plagiarism a bit, that whole issue. And then it touched on the 1919 conference, where after Ellen has died, the leaders get together and they say, okay, the Ellen White issue is kind of a problem. We haven't been honest in teaching about her. What are we going to do about it? So I tabbed a couple of quotes to read. But obviously, if you want to read the whole book, maybe actually, I'll send you the link here really quickly.
Oh, yes. I'll bring that onto the screen.
This book is available for free. I'll just send you that link in the chat here real quick.
And this is the one at Life Assurance, isn't it?
Yes. So Life Assurance Ministries, who are the ones who published the book, have it available on their website for free. There is also a scanned copy on archive.org if you want to see a copy with all the photos and graphics.
I'm just putting those in the chat, both at Facebook and YouTube. And I'll add it to the YouTube comments again after the program.
Yeah, if you want to join book club, you're welcome to jump in anytime. You could always catch up on the chapters you've missed.
Right, and I have recorded the audio, and I'm just trying to work out a way to share it. The file was too big, but I've got that, and eventually we'll be able to share it with those who are jumping in further into the book. They can play catch up.
All right, so I'll just jump into some of these quotes.
And while you're just finding that, just reminding people that I will be adding the Zoom link soon so that people can join us for our post-show, only in about 15 minutes or so, book club chat where we're going to read where we left off with Whitewashed.
I'm going to read chapter 2, which is called Do They Agree?, which is dealing on the myth that, Ellen White never wrote anything that contradicted Scripture. Ellen White never contradicts Scripture. Well, we're going to look at the evidence and find out if she did contradict Scripture or not. But anyways, so yeah, just kind of to summarize briefly some of these sections. There's this whole 2-page spread of all of these quotes about who Ellen claimed to get her inspiration from. I'm just going to read 2 of them. This one is from Testimonies Volume 3, pages 314 to 315. She says, "Some are ready to inquire, who told Sister White these things?" Speaking about, where is she getting all these things from that she's writing about? "They have even put the question to me, did anyone tell you these things? I could answer them, yes, the angel of God has spoken to me. But for the future, I shall not belittle the testimonies that God has given me to make explanations to try to satisfy such narrow minds, but shall treat all such questions as an insult to the Spirit of God." So God spoke to her, and even questioning whether or not he spoke to her is an insult to her, aka the Spirit of God.
Wow.
There are other similar ones talking about the Spirit of the Lord speaking to her, but that one particularly points out kind of her kind of self-righteous attitude about it. And this other one, in my books, the truth is stated, barricaded by a thus saith the Lord. The Holy Spirit traced these truths upon my heart and my mind. And I just feel like for people who want to say, like, oh, well, you can't take her writings that seriously. She was just a human. She was infallible, whatever. Kind of
I was about to say that, yeah.
As an excuse. No, she very clearly says that what she's written is barricaded by a thus saith the Lord.
Yeah.
Even the parts where she's like not just the quoting from "and I saw blah blah blah," but all the other stuff too is barricaded by a thus saith the Lord, and you have to take that seriously.
100%. In fact, today, Adventist Today released an article talking about this very topic. It's called Revisiting Our Prophet Problem. But they say the prophet problem is really about she was a human and she was fallible, and how people need to see that in context. And I thought you're just simply offering a diversionary tactic. I'm not complaining about Adventist Today. I think they're brilliant. They're a great publication. But they're in essence inadvertently highlighting that it's not the issue. That I think they use a quote from someone saying, I wish I can't remember, but it's about a flawed messenger. Be careful not to invalidate their message, kind of thing. And we're not invalidating. We're not saying that a flawed person can't have a valid message. We're saying that she claims that this message came from God, and demonstrably several times it didn't. And so therefore we're not trying to say, oh, well, she's flawed, but the message is great. We're saying the message wasn't even from God in the first place. So what does that mean?
You can have a flawed messenger, but not a flawed message.
Yes.
To that, I would say, okay, look at Jonah. Flawed messenger, ran away from God, did the bare minimum to try to tell people what God wanted him to tell them. Was mad at God that he saved these people after he told it, whatever, but he still and what's the other one? Balaam. He went, the king had him go up and try to curse Israel. And God said, no, you can't do that. And he opened his mouth to try to curse Israel, and blessings came out. He physically was unable to lie and to curse people and whatever. So, like, if someone who's, and that was a prophet intentionally trying to cause harm and go against God and whatever. So what does that say about someone who's claiming to speak for God, but their message is so full of errors? That seems to be impossible in the Bible with the Bible prophets.
What are your thoughts on when Ellen White had what are your thoughts on when Ellen had the food for thought vision, and it did food for worms vision, and of course that didn't happen? And so Adventist apologists say, well, it was conditional, and the condition was that if they'd kept the three angels' messages, the Lord would have returned in that time that Ellen had predicted. And they then say, well, that was the same with Jonah. It wasn't conditional in the message, but it was something that was conditional later. What are your thoughts on that one? Because I think Whitewashed looks into that a bit.
Whitewashed does go into that in a later chapter, probably a lot more eloquently than I can. From my understanding, that explanation is null and void because there's other sources that confirm her original vision, and I think it was her son or something keeping track of who was alive and who died, and how that directly upheld the vision as she said it. It was not conditional, all that kind of stuff. It goes into it. I forget which chapter, and whichever one is about prophecy in here. It's not one that I am super, super familiar with. So I would say to that, just hang on and
wait till we get to that part of the book. It's coming. It's coming. I remember there was a good explanation to that.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, anyway, so the first little section of the chapter is establishing that Ellen White definitely claimed that what she was writing came from God. And then the next kind of little section gets into some of the plagiarism stuff. It says, in January of 1980, Walter Ray, then an SDA pastor and college Bible teacher, presented to church leaders the evidence he had discovered about her plagiarism. Ray demonstrated that Ellen White had copied so much from other authors that there is hardly an original thought in any of her books. And so along with which the book, I think you had it just sitting there, The White Lie, goes into his whole, that's kind of his breakdown of all of that. And then they also mention, kind of in response to that triggered the Veltman study, where, actually just the next section. This was a terrible shock to Seventh-day Adventism, so the General Conference sponsored the church's own 8-year investigation into the Desire of Ages, then thought to be the most authentic of her many books, to determine if Ellen White really copied from other authors. The research team was led by their own Dr. Fred Veltman, then the chair of the Pacific Union College's religion department. And it just also shared a snippet about his study. I think it was you or Adrian, somebody had a link to the whole study.
Yeah, we've got a link to the whole study.
Um,
And I
they-
think was your husband going to be doing some research on that for us, or I threw the gauntlet, not I
time.
threw the challenge out there anyway. But it was interesting in our last book club session. I think most of the people in the Zoom room said they had never even heard of this Fred Veltman thing, and it blew their minds. The church is so good at covering up, like it's over a 2,000-page document that just proves conclusively that there was extensive borrowing going on.
And they printed a smaller
Yeah.
article in Ministry Magazine, November of 1990, page 11, called "The Desire of Ages Project: The Conclusions,"
Yeah.
which is the summary of that study.
Yeah, 2.5-page summary.
Yeah, which is quoted in here. This is Dr. Veltman. I must admit at the start that in my judgment, this is the most serious problem to be faced in connection with Ellen White's literary dependency, copying. It strikes at the heart of her honesty, her integrity, and therefore her trustworthiness. Which I think is actually the little quote to the beginning of this chapter. But yeah.
See, that's interesting because you're talking about it was published in Ministry Magazine. That was published. There was two types. There was two Ministry magazines, and please fact check me if I'm wrong, anyone. But one was a subscription based for pastors that had extra content, and one was for the layperson. And in the layperson's one, this is all they published. The 8-year study of Ellen White's possible borrowing of materials from other writers for her book, The Desire of Ages, ended this year, with researcher Fred Veltman concluding that her book does contain some ideas and phrasing similar to those of other writers, but that it is independent of verbatim borrowing. So that's what went out to the general public. Now, if you were a subscriber to the Ministers magazine, it only went to ministers, and you had to pay for it. And even then, you only got what you read out. There was a 2.5-page summary.
Actually, there's another quote actually in direct contrast with the one you just read.
And just to finish that train of thought, the people could buy the 2,000-page thing, but back in like 1988 money, I can't remember what it was. It was over $500 or $600 US. So who's going to pay $500 or $600 to get a 2,000-page document? I'd love to know how many they sold. Hardly any, but it's available for free now. And that's the other thing. They call it a different title. There's 2 or 3 different titles. And so it's hard to find.
A misdirection. Yeah, in contrast to the one that you just read about how, she didn't really, there's some ideas that are similar, but she didn't really copy. What the other one says is, the content of Ellen White's commentary on the life and ministry of Christ, The Desire of Ages, is for the most part derived, copied, rather than original. In practical terms, this conclusion declares that one is not able to recognize in Ellen White's writings on the life of Christ any general category of content or catalog of ideas that is unique to her.
And who wrote that? Was that Fred?
Yeah.
See, isn't that amazing? Because that is just damning. And if they'd written that in the layperson's ministry, it would have had a huge impact. But they didn't get that. They weren't given that information. And then he later on does another little bit of a minor backflip, or I'd better put in something here positive. You might have it there, where he kind of says, but I still love Ellen White and I still want to get it and blah, blah, blah. And that also was used to say there's nothing to see here. To me, that study is one of the most damning studies done on Ellen White, and it's so hidden and no one reads it, and it's very difficult to find.
Most people don't know about it.
Most people don't even know about it and never have. I've done 2 full shows on it with Arthur Klim, if people want to look them up. And there's a really good book. I've forgotten the title. Summary. I mentioned it when we last chatted. Sorry.
No, you're good. Still along the same lines, I wanted to read these paragraph here. Seventh-day Adventist lay people seldom stop to think that virtually everything they read about Ellen White is written by those who are apologists, those who are biased in favor of Ellen White's prophetic ministry, and who have a vested interest in promoting the concept that she was divinely inspired. But notice, in commenting on the Veltman study, Robert Olson suggested this time the church had produced a neutral, non biased evaluation of Ellen White. When Veltman researched Ellen White from what his church considered a neutral perspective, the evidence led him to conclude there are serious doubts about her honesty, her integrity, and therefore her trustworthiness. That's a quote. During that interview, the then head of Ellen White Estate, Robert Olson, went on to make some startling personal admissions about Ellen White. As you read these admissions, remember they come from the man Seventh-day Adventists had commissioned to lead their defense of Ellen White in her divinely inspired ministry. And I'm not going to go into all the long quotes, but here's kind of his 4 admissions. Based on this study was 1, Ellen White contradicted herself. 2, Ellen White copied Samuel Andrews's chronology of Christ's life when writing The Desire of Ages, and thus her chronology can no longer be considered inspired. 3, Ellen White's writings and theology changed over the years as she revised her mistakes. And 4, it is not up to the White estate to decide which of Ellen White's writings are divinely inspired and which are not. I will read that quote for that one, actually. I don't believe it is the role of the White estate to determine what is time conditioned and what is not. That's up to the individuals as they apply Ellen White's counsels to their lives. Which was quoted in the introduction, basically saying the leader of the White estate in the church admits Ellen White is in error, but they're not going to tell you when and where. That's up to you to figure out and decide yourself. It's not a very there's like passing the buck on the responsibility. It's not a very transparent way to do theology.
I'll just bring up onto the screen just a quick share of the book I was just talking about. It's called The Desire of Ages and Its Sources by, I don't know if you can see, I can hardly read that. Let me see, Warren C. Trenchard. And I've mentioned him and the book many times, but this is The Desire of Ages and Its Sources, condensed edition of Life of Christ Research Project Report. See, sometimes it's Life of Christ, sometimes it's Desire of Ages, but this is a paperback version. You can get it for, I think, around $10 on Kindle, around $20 on paperback, and it is an incredible read. If people want to get into the meat of this particular topic, it is really, really good. And there is also, which I just found a while back, I'll just quickly share this. This is on Truth or Fables, and if you type in Fred Veltman, The Desire of Ages Project, the data, there is a really interesting interview that they have, and a bit of a summary and an interview they have. Can you see me scrolling there? There's various questions I think they're asking of Veltman himself, and it's not that long. I thought I might do a show just on that, where I just read that particular article. But the church spent an estimated $450,000 in the mid 80s on this project, and that's got to be a huge amount in today's dollars. So I will endeavor to remember to actually do a show soon and just read that. It's only 2 or 3 pages long, but
Mhm.
it's a question answer with, I think, Fred Veltman or maybe the guy that you just mentioned from the White Estate. But it's very interesting conversation they have. We could role play. You could pretend to be the person asking the questions and read the
Sure.
questions, and then I'll read the answers and pretend I'm Fred Veltman.
Oh, yeah. Just kind of to wrap up before we go over to the book club.
Sure.
The last section of the chapter, kind of after the plagiarism stuff, they talked about the 1919 conference. I'll just read a tiny bit of that.
Yes.
In 1919, 4 years after Ellen White's death, the Seventh-day Adventist Church assembled its top leadership, theologians, editors, and scholars in an attempt to arrive at a mutually acceptable decision about the validity of Ellen White's ministry. They met at church headquarters in Tacoma Park, Washington, D.C. during a Bible conference, which was to last most of July and on into August. And in the book, it's got a whole list of all the people in attendance and what their positions were, like the general conference president and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to read just quickly the bullet points of the conclusions that they came to in that 1919 conference. And it's got a whole bunch of quotes of dialogue from the minutes of those meetings. I'm not going to read that. You can go back and read the chapter if you want all of that. But just to summarize, here's what came out of that conference of the church leaders deciding, what are we going to do about Ellen White? These are the conclusions. 1, Ellen White was not verbally inspired. 2, Ellen White was not infallible as a person. 3, Ellen White was not infallible in her exegesis of the Bible, meaning she made some errors there. 4, Ellen White is not an authority on which translation of the Bible to use. On which translation of the Bible to use. 5, Ellen White is not accurate on world history, nor is she accurate on the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Number 6, Ellen White is not to be used to settle controversies arising from different interpretations of Scripture, which I find particularly hilarious because that's kind of the MO.
Exactly.
7, Ellen White's health messages are not blanket regulations for everyone. 8, Ellen White repeatedly copied from other authors without giving credit to them, and while claiming to be inspired of God. 9, Ellen White's divine inspiration is questionable. 10, I love this one. If humans have to correct Ellen White's writings, then how can anyone claim her work was divinely inspired? 11, if the church had told the truth about Ellen White, it would not be in the difficulty it is in now. And just again to reiterate, these are not anti-Ellen White people making statements. This is the general conference president and all the top leaders of the church at that time.
Yeah.
Go back and you can read the quotes and the minutes and the dialogue back and forth of these men arriving at this conclusions. So don't come after us. We're just reading what your leaders have said.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just to kind of at the end of it said, after addressing each of these issues and coming to unofficial agreement on them, General Conference President A.G. Daniels requested that the official minutes of their discussions be locked up for the next 50 years. The best opportunity for the church's leaders to communicate the truth about Ellen White had passed. The official records of the 1919 Bible Conference were filed away until December of 1974, when Dr. F. Donald Yost discovered them wrapped in paper in a vault at the General Conference headquarters. The packages contained some 2,400 typewritten pages transcribed from the official stenographic notes taken at the meeting. Subsequently, pertinent excerpts were printed in Spectrum Volume 10, Number 1. Unfortunately, that issue is no longer available from Spectrum. And then it lists a place where you can get a photocopy of it. from some address. I doubt that's still a valid address
Mm.
anymore. But just, yeah, so they came to all these conclusions, wrote them all down, and rather than actually deal with the aftermath in the church, the leader said, well, let's just wrap it up, put it in the vault for 50 years, leave it for somebody else, make it their problem, and we're just going to continue letting people believe all the lies and the myths and just continue our cushy little lives, profiting off other church members. And at the very end of the chapter, they quote someone from that same one that says, "We are in this fix because of a wrong education that our people have had. If we had always taught the truth on this question about Ellen White, we would not have any trouble or shock in the denomination now. But the shock is because we have not taught the truth." And so that's basically the conclusion of chapter 1. Ellen White lied. She plagiarized. The church knew about it. The leaders knew about it. They locked it up for 50 years because they didn't want to take responsibility for the lies.
Yeah.
And where does that leave us now? Then on to chapter 2. But
Yeah. And isn't that interesting that like there were in many ways the roots of the liberal progressive revisionist gospel Adventist, and the president Daniels, A.G. Daniels, was one of these guys saying, but what about this and what about that? Prescott, all these admired leaders. But what's interesting is that they and the traditional Adventists wanted to hide it. Both sides wanted to hide it. And even when it was discovered in the 70s, it was still another 2 years before it got out there and I think only because someone kind of leaked it.
Mm-hmm. And only in a limited capacity.
Yeah. And now we're going to head off in a minute. Just a quick little aside thing. And I've put the Zoom links there. So go and join now, everybody. We're going to kick that off in about 15 minutes at most, maybe 10. Barry has asked, has anyone read about Ellen's vinegar addiction? I don't think it's mentioned in this book, but I am doing a show on that soon with a guy who actually is a big Adventist apologist, but has done a lot of research on this, and he's actually a lawyer, and he's going to do a show with me soon on that very topic, the vinegar addiction.
Actually, I think it is mentioned I think it is in the chapter called Ahead of Her Time, because that talks about some of the health and stuff. I think. I could be wrong.
Could be wrong. Yeah. Well, we will come to that soon. So 2 quick things. Everybody, first thing, the link to the Zoom private meeting is shared now, and go and click it. Join us we might just get through 1 chapter today. What chapter are we up to? 2, is it?
Chapter 2. Yep. Chapter
Awesome.
2. Do they agree? Oop, get it on camera. Is what Ellen White wrote, does it contradict the scripture? Does it not? There's a lot of side comparison. It's going to be really good.
Awesome. So Rachelle is going to read that, and it was great last time. This is our 2nd book club. We're going to try and kick it off more regularly after this. And the second bit of news is starting tomorrow. I'm going to have a whole new season kick off tomorrow, season 13. Hopefully it's good luck. But it will be pretty much every week until we're done a 45th Des Ford Glacier View retrospective. It's 45 years since Glacier View, and 5 years since season 2, where I interviewed so many people that were there. And we're going to once a week just watch live one of these interviews and have a tiny commentary. I might even try, for example, the second interview is with Dr. Godfrey, and I'm going to see if he can come on board and watch with me his interview. Norm Young is, I think, the third interview. Now, what I'm also doing is getting a lot of people have expressed a desire to support the channel by sponsoring these episodes. And so if you're interested, you can pick one of the 86, and I'm only going to charge $150. Your name, you can promote your book, your link, whatever you want. It'll come 3 times in each program at least. and it will be there for decades. People are going to be watching this season for a long time. And it's a dream come true for me because I've been trying to get season 2 up there. When I start putting it onto different channels, there's like 20 subscribers there. When I've tried to put it in here, it goes to a different part of the channel. The live channel is where you guys are all watching. So once a week, we're just going to play the episode live and get to sit back and see this incredible season that, wow, will blow your mind. Starting tomorrow, make sure you join us. And tomorrow's episode is the interview with Bill Johnson, Dr. William G. Johnson. And wow, that episode is really why I'm still here 5 years later chatting to you guys. That's what kicked this all off. Well, rejuvenated the channel anyway. So, Rachelle, it's going to be a very interesting time. Once a week, and then that way over a long period of time. We
Maybe
will,
every other week. We'll see.
We'll finally get them there. What was that?
Maybe every other week.
Yeah, it'll take
you
too
mean
long.
Your
So
show
every week.
I
What's
thought you meant
that?
book club maybe every other week.
Oh yeah. No. This is
Sorry,
this is the 45th Glacier View Des Ford retrospective. There's going to be one show a week on that, and then one interview a week as normal. Good News Fellowship as normal as our third program, and then maybe once every other week book club where we will be reading through this book, Whitewashed, and then onto other books. And that gives people a chance also to read a couple of weeks as well. Okay, well, that's me done. Did you want to say anything else on this before we head over to Zoom?
I don't think so, other than I assume we're taking like a 10-minute break or something.
Yes, there'll be a 10-minute break just for me to save this file. Bathroom break, go and get a hot coffee. I need to refuel. I'll get something. And I've put the link out there, though. Go to the waiting room now, everybody, and I will start letting everybody in about 10 minutes' time. Awesome. We'll see you all there. Thanks, Rachelle. Great chatting with you. And we'll see you in a few minutes. See you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.